If you could, would you ensure that your loved ones received the COVID vaccine? If you could, would you support hourly workers receiving a minimum wage? If you could, would you change the injustices of our systemic racism? If your child had a learning disability, would you propose the best learning opportunities for them? If your parents were in a nursing home, wouldn't you want to ensure they were secure and comfortable? If the answer to any of these is yes, then you have the power to be an advocate, to be a defender, an influencer. Advocacy is a powerful notion that converts the what is to the what should be. To advocate is to have courage and commitment for the things that matter to us. It comes from within our own personal experiences or from the empathy we feel from others, or if we're lucky, sometimes from both. Its effect is to influence decisions in political, economic, and social systems by influencing individuals, communities, and institutions. As advocates, we can change the world around us. But it doesn't mean changing the whole world. It just means changing the world you live in. We best use advocacy when we are fueled by focus and joined by allies, all while understanding our historical context of the change we seek. Let me tell you about my historical context and the passion that fueled my focus, along with the allies that supported my advocacy journey. In recent years, when I am asked what I do for a living, I smile and answer truthfully. I keep families together. Now that response usually yields a positive one, but when there's a follow-up question to my actual title, not so much. When I share that I am an immigration attorney, I usually get one of two responses. The first, and the most common, has been, "Oh, great." The second has been, "Oh my, you must be exhausted, bless your heart." While I prefer the latter, I am not discouraged by the former. You see, being an immigrant advocate has been a part of my identity since I was a child. I just didn't realize it until much later on in my adult life. This is why Maya Angelou's words resonate so deeply with me. You cannot really know where you are going until you know where you have been. The root of my commitment to immigrants can be summarized in two vivid childhood memories. The first, I was 6 years old in kindergarten. My sister and I had just arrived from Colombia. We were living in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and it was no secret we were the only foreigners in that school. One day, during recess, my sister, who was in the second grade, was pushing me on the swing set, when out of nowhere, Jason and his friends stood directly in front of us. With a mean look on his face, he told us to get off his swing. The natural-born rebel in me looked to the right, and I looked to my left, and after seeing empty swings on both sides, I said, "No, we're not leaving." At that time, as Celia Cruz used to say, our English was not very good looking, and so it gave him ample opportunity to mock our broken English. After he finished his slew of insults and his face had transformed, his eyes had squinted, his forehead had crinkled, his face all red, he yelled, "Get out of here, you spicks!" That hateful phrase was immediately followed by his spit landing on my forehead, my 6-year-old forehead. I may have been young and naive to understand the racist meaning of that word, but I instantly felt the disgust in his voice. And to this day, I can still feel the fury of hate in his words. I just remember feeling helpless and dirty. The second memory occurred when I was 13 years old, living in Hagerstown, Maryland. I was at the grocery store with my family when I had wandered off and overheard a woman speaking Spanish to the cashier. I immediately smiled. Finding another person that spoke Spanish in public in that town was like finding a unicorn. There weren't that many of us, and if we were seen, we quickly disappeared. Although I could see that she was using her young daughter to translate, the cashier's face of contempt told me otherwise. At that time, my English had dramatically improved, and so I was overwhelmed with the desire to go and help her, and so I did. I invited my inquisitive self into that conversation and began translating as if I had been there the entire time. The woman's eyes gave a sigh of relief. I don't remember the cashier, but I have never forgotten the gratitude shining through that woman's smile. It is one of my earliest memories of what it feels like to have a true moment of connection with a complete stranger, and what empathy has felt like for me ever since. As an immigrant child, I did experience the initial bouts of racism, but that faded as I eventually thrived. I excelled in high school, went to college on a scholarship. There, I studied and worked full-time, and I volunteered at the Human Rights Center, translating for immigrants and refugees. My senior year in college, I took a course in international human rights, and one might say, this is where the trajectory of my present life began. The professor, who was a priest that had later become an immigration and international human rights attorney, exemplified a love for humanity that transcended his lectures and all of his worldly travels. His raw and compassionate teachings were so infectious, they ignited in me a spark I didn't know I had. But as I got older, I realized that spark had actually been there all along. It had been there since I was a child. It just needed to come into focus. His teachings bridged the gap between my personal immigrant experiences and the realization that I had privilege, even as an immigrant. Yeah, I had suffered severe childhood traumas, and I had to work multiple jobs to sustain myself. But nonetheless, I came to understand that I had been afforded opportunities my immigrant counterparts had not. This awareness fueled me all the way to law school, where I specifically pursued a field in law that stemmed from the very discomfort I had first felt as my 6 and 13-year-old self. As an immigrant adult, I've been fortunate to have incredible role models. First in undergrad, then in law school, and now in my present day. They have supported my ideas, they have encouraged my creativity, and they have challenged my thought process. Their actions have showed me the impact of advocacy. I'll never forget the time that my law school mentor purchased an entire washer and dryer set for her immigrant client, who, with her minor child, had just escaped an abusive relationship. It wasn't so much the purchase that left an impression on me, as it was the fact that in different ways, she always showed up for her clients. My role models have had one thing in common, and that is that they have consistently and selflessly showed up. As an adult, I have tried to intentionally surround myself with those type of people. People who are kind, who are wise, who are selfless. Leaders who know how to follow. Organizers with infectious energies, empowering women and the men that support them. People of color who refuse to be silenced. Survivors who became fearless. Marginalized people who found their voice. Resilient immigrant and refugees. And if there was ever a time that the world needed more of these allies and of these advocates and their collective love, it is now. We need them now more than ever. The development of my advocacy journey has led me here today. To my core, I believe this fundamental truth. No human being is illegal. I say it, I breathe it, I live it. So much so that it's the guest Wi-Fi password at my office. I have shouted it at the top of my lungs at every march and rally I have attended. And I correct every immigrant that calls themselves an illegal, because here they've only known themselves to be illegal, to be less than, to be dirty. Illegal alien is an important phrase that is neither accurate nor neutral. It is offensive and dehumanizing, and in recent years has been intentionally polarizing. Human beings cannot be illegal. Mass shootings are illegal. Rape and sexual assault are illegal. Discrimination, tax evasion, bribery, wire fraud, abuse of power, those acts are illegal. Immigrants, whether documented or not, have names and families. They have hopes and dreams just like you and I do. They want better for themselves just like you and I do. They bleed the exact same red blood that you and I bleed. They are human, just like you and me. The woman who, after 13 years of enduring horrific abuse at the hands of her husband, who was subjected to rapes and beatings and thus miscarriages, who had no protection from her destabilized government, who fled in order to just breathe. That woman and her child are human, just like you and me. The man who arrived 10, 20 years ago looking for better opportunities, but who stayed, who built a life and a family here, who has worked here and paid taxes, who has been an otherwise outstanding citizen. That man is human, just like you and me. But when they are forced to flee their country due to the ongoing persecution of corrupt governments, or the wars and civil wars and the devastating aftermath, or the violence of criminal transnational organizations, or the deadly political unrest, or the severe economic despair, they are cast aside as subhuman and generalized as criminals. That hateful phrase of illegal alien can be countered with the power of accurate and compassionate words, because as we know, words are so powerful, they can either unite a nation or cause an insurrection. They are so powerful, they can start a movement or they can leave a lifetime impression. Words are transformational. As an immigrant advocate, I believe that undocumented immigrants are Americans just like you and me. So where can your advocacy journey begin? How can you help your family or your neighbor? We'll start with this basic concept. In what settings or circumstances does your heart pull you to do more or make you mindful of doing better? Perhaps you heard something that made you emotional. Perhaps seeing someone suffering drew you to want to help or protect them. Maybe an experience left you suddenly uncomfortable and you didn't know why. Pay attention to that reaction and that discomfort in your gut. Talk to it, listen to it, identify it, for it might be how your passion can come into focus. The magnitude of your advocacy does not have to be huge. Gandhi said it best when he said, "Do not look for big things, just do small things with great love. The smaller the thing, the greater must be our love." So identify what moves you. What sparks a flurry of ideas and thoughts? And after that interest emerges, then put it into focus by seeking your allies. Search amongst your friends, your colleagues, your community contacts. Look at your leaders and the movers and shakers that work in and around that interest. You will find much happiness building and organizing with them. Their knowledge will polish your ideas, and they will connect you with even more diverse thinkers, and you will evolve. This is how you can begin to change the world you live in from the what is to the what should be. It is how your "if I could" can become the "I did." It is how you can become the advocate this world needs. J.K. Rowling said, "We do not need magic to change the world. We have all the power inside us already. We have the power to imagine better." I imagine a world where no one is illegal. Will you join me?